people have about Venezuela. Will it be, and Cuba, will it be a worse government under the new administration or the new regime versus the old regime? We've seen that happen in Asian and African countries, just to name two continents and everything like that. So I just wanted your take on this notion of the fear factor, because there are some people that are looking at these different political models and are afraid of what would come next if those systems are destroyed.
Well, I certainly think socialism is something to fear. It's never succeeded in the history of the world. It can't succeed because you can't predict what's going to happen. Therefore, you can't plan. When Russia had 5-year plans, they always failed because trying to predict 5 years out what you're going to do never works. Another thing to look at is people vote with their feet. Well, where does the most immigration to occur? To the United States.
Yeah.
How many people do you see in countries like the United States, Great Britain, or India fighting to migrate to North Korea or Venezuela or Cuba? You don't see it. If socialism was wonderful, that's where people would be going, but they're not.
Yep. Nick, Rick, you had a question, and then see.
Yeah, so tech makes things cheaper. Like the cost of food and clothing compared to 120 years ago is like 25% because tech has made it cheap to make stuff. And that trend will continue and will disrupt other industries. Medicine's still expensive. It should get cheaper in the next few decades. Housing will probably get a little cheaper. So is it socialism when tech makes stuff so freaking cheap that it's almost free? Is it socialism to give people, super cheap stuff?
Well, socialism's got a problem giving anything to anybody because socialism doesn't have anything. All they can do is take from the people and redistribute it. The problem with that is what the problem has always been with socialism. You may not realize this, but the United States began as a collectivist country. Jamestown and the Mayflower colony both started out collectivist, and they very quickly devolved into starvation because people found out really quickly that the hardest workers just stopped working. Why? Because they didn't benefit them. People are basically self-interested. Now, I need to define the difference. Self-interested is not the same as selfish. Selfish means I try and take from you just because. Self-interest means I have to look out for myself.
Right.
And I do. But I don't do that to excess. I don't take from you just because. And one way we look at that in economics is we look at what's called the pie. That is how much stuff there is. Remember I mentioned earlier about between 0 and 1,500. The pie was a fixed size. That is, the amount of stuff there was in the world didn't change. It was all just there. So if you wanted to get more, you had to take it from somebody else. That was the only way to get it. But since 1,500, and particularly since about 1,700, capitalists have been growing the pie. That is, we make more stuff, so more stuff is available that we can all share. That's really the point, is that everybody ends up better off. Capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any other system that's ever been imagined. 100 years ago, most of the world lived in abject poverty. Now it's 9%. And that's worldwide. Okay.
Dr. Cutchill, what do you?
Let me get in one more question here.
Yeah.
So how do you think the U.S. is doing? The Heritage Foundation has an economic freedom index, which is basically how capitalistic are you as a nation? And the U.S., it's not in the top 10, but it's the most capitalistic country of its size. And that's pretty steady across the decades.
Well, actually, it's recently dropped. It's in the 20s now. And if you look at economic, you mentioned the Heritage Foundation, they also do it by state. And while many of the U.S. states have some of the highest GDP, they have some of the least economic freedom compared to other countries. Actually, Great Britain right now is listed by the Heritage Foundation as having greater economic freedom than the U.S. So it depends. When you say depending based on the size, it depends on what you mean by
let's talk
size.
about my state. I'm in California, and we're always accused of being, you know, a hell state, and everything's terrible because of socialistic and I like it here. I'm in LA, and you know we get accused of having huge taxes. My state taxes have never run more than, I don't know, like 6%. And our property taxes are ridiculously low because of Prop 13, where if you live in your house for 20 years, you're paying 1/3 of 1%, which is lower than anyway. So California, for instance.
Your take on California in terms
How
of
are we doing? Because to me, it seems like we're doing okay, except for the 100,000 homeless that we have.
Yeah. Well, I think in general in the U.S., we're doing okay. Obviously, like I said, everybody wants to move here from throughout the world. I saw a recent Gallup poll that said a fourth of the world would move here if they could.
wow.
Well, I mean, you can't say we've got a bad place here if a fourth of the world wants to get here. And
I hear what you're saying, Dr. Cartel, but in that
you won't
same
see a whole lot of Americans clamoring to go somewhere else.
no, I don't see that. But Dr. Cartel, in that same realm, you see a lot of people that are concerned about the widening income gap and everything like that. Because I'm actually friends with, actually, he's a family member, Dr. Darity, that had been doing some research about reparations for African Americans and everything along those lines. But part of what he talks about is the growing wage and income gap that exists between our society. So we have the very rich, like the Elon Musk that Rick was referring to, but we also have very poor here in the U.S. as well. And that seems to be widening. So that seems to be one of the problems that people have with the capitalist system as it works in the United States. So I just wanted your take on that complaint and what can be done as an economist in your mind to address that.
Well, first of all, as I said, in times of dynamic change, we have that rubber band effect. So you're always going to see income inequality and wealth inequality grow dramatically initially, but then you're going to see it contract and make everybody better off. It's just an unfortunate fact of the way progress has to work, because you have to have a way for somebody to lead the way to the new place, and then they drag everybody else along with them. And yes, that's going to take time, but by the greatest measures of inequality, income inequality, the U.S. is pretty much right in the middle compared to the other countries in the world. We're basically right in the middle. We have about the average inequality. And the places where there's the most inequality is the socialist countries. Look at North Korea. The in-group has money hand over fist. The poor are poor beyond our ability to imagine it. Okay. They have literally at times been in situations where they had to eat their children.
Wow.
That's poverty at a level that we can't even comprehend.
Right.
And at the same time, Kim Jong-il lives in a huge mansion and gets anything he wants. You want to talk about inequality, you have to look at socialism.
Right. So by any estimation, the rubber band is going to keep stretching for the next couple of decades because AI is going to freaking disrupt everything. So my question is, as you know, you've got can we avoid like a French Revolution kind of thing? Will benefits for the poor and the middle class trickle down fast enough to keep the world from revolting against the rich?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And basically, the answer is if the government stays out of it, the answer is yes. Because here's what happens as that rubber band stretches and the government intervenes, it tends to to contract a whole lot slower. Because the problem is that government can't react as fast as people can react. This is the idea of what's called spontaneous order. Spontaneous order is the idea that small entities inside a large entity can operate independently and make stuff work out just fine. Your body is an excellent example of that. Okay? We like to think that our brains control everything in our body. That's utter nonsense. First of all, half your body isn't even human. That's literally true. About half of the cells in your body are viruses, bacteria, fungi. Clearly, your brain has no control over those. But even the cells of your body are not under your control. You cannot control a single cell in your liver. That cell, that liver cell in your body, doesn't even know you exist. It lives in what it sees as an environment, your liver, and it does what it has to do to survive. It just sits there being a cell. And sometimes that gets out of control. Cancer is a good example of that. And so if God forbid any of us ever get cancer, we're going to have to take action. That's the government's job. The government then has to intervene and say, that cancer cell has gotten too selfish. It's going beyond self-interest and exploiting the rest of the body for its own benefit. So we have to do something about that. And so we treat it. Mm-hmm. The same thing is true with government. The government has to intervene and stop that kind of stuff.
Well, speaking of intervention, one of the things that I know the government does sometimes, and it doesn't just exist here, it exists in other parts of the world as well. And we got Sasha, whose show will be coming up in about 10 minutes. It deals with Ukraine and their fight for freedom against Russia and everything like that, is that sometimes the government will use the war economy in order to improve the economy and everything like that. That's what some people are speculating is going on with Trump's current fixation with Venezuela and the Caribbean and everything like that. So I'm just wondering, is that a danger in the capitalistic society? Is this whole notion that sometimes you have to create disruption in order to make it work better? Because that is something that's been going on even historically. We have seen periods where there has been a rough period and then there would be some sort of disruption, some sort of war that would cause everybody to unify and everything like that. So I just wondering, is that one of the dangers of capitalism?
Well, I wouldn't call it a danger endemic to capitalism. I think it's a danger for, you mentioned Russia. Obviously, Russia's not doing it in a capitalist way. They're marginally socialist. And does it help the economy? Well, if you look back over history, there have been wars that have helped economies. There have been wars that have decimated economies, sorry. And so it just depends on which war you're talking about, who the war was between. I think it would be incorrect to say that war generally helps economies. I think more likely it will harm the economy because you're committing resources to stuff that doesn't produce things. Mm-hmm. And ultimately a part of the basic misconception of socialism and people that are worried about the rubber band is that people tend to talk about things like working for a living. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. We don't work for a living. It's a dumb idea. You can spend all day digging holes and filling them up again, and you've done a lot of work. Why shouldn't you get paid a lot for that? Because you produced no value. What the five of us are doing here right now is trying to produce value for your listeners. Mm-hmm. Okay? We're not here out of selfishness. We're not here trying to get something for ourselves. We're here trying to create value for somebody else. Yeah. Now, will we profit from it? Yes, probably. I don't know how everybody else here gets paid. Hopefully, I'm going to sell a few books out of this. Mm-hmm. So I'll make some money, but that's not why I'm here. That's not why I wrote the book. I want to create value for others. And I assume that that's what all the rest of us here want to do. And if what we do is focus on creating value, ultimately we will eliminate poverty. Because part of the problem with poverty is that too many people were brought up to believe you have to go to college. Wrong. You don't have to go to college. We need electricians. We need plumbers. We need lots of people that don't go to college. We need a lot of people who are out there creating value. And if you're out there creating value from others, you're going to do fine financially.
That makes sense and everything.
Our current government, well, the legislative branch has been fairly paralyzed for years and years. And the market kind of likes that because, you've been talking of the less the government does, the more the markets are, industry is free to do what it wants. So how do you think we're doing, our national government? Is it good that we're paralyzed?
Well, I guess it depends on how it's paralyzed. I guess what I would say, if I could rewrite the Constitution as far as the legislative branch is concerned, the things I would do differently, well, first thing I would do is put a time limit on every law. So any law that has huge effect, I would say maybe a 25-year limit. Some of the lesser laws, maybe 10 years, something like that, so that every law expires and has to be reauthorized. Next thing I would do is eliminate, I would make everything like the filibuster. In other words, I would say that you want to pass a law, you've got to get 65, 2/3 or 3/4 majority. Why? Because the reason we're paralyzed is because we keep going back and forth between 51 and 49% on each side of a center line. And what that means is that one time 51% are telling the other 49% what to do. And then as soon as the balance shifts, that 51%, the whole thing shifts. That's nuts. If something is a good idea, 2/3 to 3/4 of us should agree on it. And if we can't get that kind of agreement, why should it be a law?
So even, if I'm hearing you correctly, even laws that are seen as beneficial, whether it's the Civil Rights Act or the, some people would say beneficial, depending on your views, the gay rights kind of laws, and even some people that are fans of guns, the gun laws, you would have all of those laws put back up 25 years later, regardless of whether they are considered beneficial or not. Because, I mean, there are some laws that some people would say are universally beneficial and have been beneficial for 50, 60 years, if not longer.
Well, sure. But if they're beneficial, they'll be reauthorized. That's the point, is that over time, we should learn. We should go, oh, I'm not happy with the way that law has been working out. Maybe we shouldn't reauthorize it. But this law, say the Civil Rights Act, is working great. Let's stick with it. Let's reauthorize it or make it stronger. See,
Would
that's
you
the
apply
thing.
that?
We
Would you
don't
apply that
allow
to-
ourselves to experiment.
Would you apply that to marriage? For some people are saying "till death do us part" is no longer realistic, because when system was created, people were dead by 60 or 65. Now that we're living, and we're gonna keep living longer and longer, should marriage have an expiration date where you have to renew it after 20 years?
Well, I guess first of all, I personally think that we should divorce civil union from marriage. Civil union is a legal construct. Marriage is a religious construct. And so I would say leave marriage up to the religious folks. In other words, if the Catholic Church wants to decide a marriage lasts forever, great. If a different church wants to put a 3-year expiration date on it, fine. As far as civil union, that's something that would be up for renewal. If we pass a law saying marriage is forever, okay, 25 years or 10 years, however long the expiration date is, we reevaluate that and say, is this working for our society, or is it causing more problems? we have to be free to experiment. But the problem is that we aren't. Laws that were passed 100 years ago are still in force today, even though they aren't working.
All right, one more example. I think one of the most famous examples lately of a law that expired was we banned semi-auto rifles like AK-47s for about 20 years, and the law expired. While it was enforced, there were fewer mass shootings, but we haven't been able to reestablish that law. Is that a triumph of the system, or is that something that's messed up?
Well, first of all, mass shootings have been increasing with and without automatic weapons. I'm going to go ahead and say this. It's a little bit dangerous, but I'll say it anyway. I own an AR-15. I own a lot of guns. I was in the military. I shot expert with everything the Army had and with everything the Air Force had. I will tell you absolutely that if you were going to do a mass shooting, the last thing you would choose would be an AR-15 or an AK-47. Those are civilian versions. They are not fully automatic. They have the same rate of fire as a 9mm pistol. So people, first of all, misunderstand that.
Going to start, Sasha. You have Ivan, and Ivan's got a video. That's what I accidentally hit earlier.
Pardon me?
Sorry. That was something else.
He was doing other business.
But the automatic versions that the military uses are called assault weapons. Why? Because they're really good for assaulting a fixed position. So if you want to take a hill, assault weapons are great. If you're in a situation, aside from a sniper situation, now in a sniper situation, something like an AK-47 is a reasonable choice for a weapon. But in most of the mass shootings, they happen in close proximity. You'd be far better off with a handgun where you could maneuver far more quickly. Now, again, like I say, this is kind of dangerous. I'm not trying to give helpful hints to mass shooters.
Mass shooters are, by definition, lunatics, so they don't think systematically. So they're going to pick the biggest, manliest guns, even if it's not the best gun for the job. So we're at the end of the hour. You should tell people how to get buy your book, see your website, all that stuff.
Well, my website is dougcardell.com. And my book is available for pre-order on Amazon. It won't actually be released until January 20th, but it's already we send out advanced reader copies, and so it's already got a 5-star rating on Goodreads. And I think it's going to do really well. I hope everybody out there will buy it if they want to learn more about socialism and want to learn more about the problems of capitalism. I think so far, the feedback I've been getting is that people are really getting educated.
All right. Well, I've got one more question for you. Where there are, I'd say there are kind of crazy people who say taxation is theft, and that to me, having public libraries and public roads and cops and fire departments doesn't seem to me to be socialism. It just seems to be making some reasonable concessions to the way things work. Are libraries and cops socialism?
No, not at all. Again, I am certainly nowhere near the point of saying that government is illegitimate, but I am saying that there are things the government does that are illegitimate. I mentioned my website. One of my articles on my website, if you want to look it up, is called Tax Hikes. And it explains the tax system in terms of a hike. So we have a group of 100 people that are about to go on a hike, and they've decided, 51% of them decided that we're going to allocate the amount of weight that each in the packs that each person carries is going to be allocated by the fitness of the individuals. And the way it turned out was the fittest individuals had to carry 421 pounds, and the next group of people had to carry, I think it was 200 thereabouts. You can look on my website and see it, and it's obviously ridiculous, but that's exactly what the U.S. tax structure is like. Exactly. I took the numbers of the weights from the U.S. tax structure. So the people in the highest tax bracket are paying 42%. They're carrying a gigantic amount of the weight. They pay 42% of the taxes paid.
Well, okay. So
we'll probably have to continue this later because we're running into the other program.
we better one quick question: are we better off
Okay.
tax structure wise than in the early '60s when the highest tax bracket was 91% above $1 million?
Absolutely. We're definitely better off than we were then, but we'd be far better off with a flat tax.
Okay.
Okay, well, we want to thank our special guest, Dr. Doug Cardell, and hopefully everybody here will buy his book. I'm going to have to look at how I buy it in Spain because I'm in Barcelona, but we'll just have to see how that goes. And we'll see you tomorrow on World Edition. Bye-bye.